Members, we have 70-ish witnesses signed up to speak to us. Therefore, we will observe the usual procedures that we follow when we have a large number of witnesses. We'll invite people after the usual sponsor presentation and committee questions to testify for 2 minutes. And in fairness to all sides, we will alternate proponent-opponent. I do invite sponsors of legislation to indicate how they want things to start, and then just proceed from there. Sponsors may have their preferred order of their supporter witnesses, and we'll honor that as we can. I have also been given by those in opposition to the bill some preferred groupings of folks based on time availability and parameters. We'll try to follow that as best we can. Just move efficiently so that everyone has a chance to speak to the committee. With all of that said, Senator Novelate, Senator Zamora-Wilson, whoever might start with their opening comments. Senator Zamora-Wilson, looks like you have the time. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. As most of you know, I served in the military. For 25 years, I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Now, as a legislator, I continue to do so. I cherish the freedoms that we have. My experiences and backgrounds are unique, encompassing national security, economics, analytics, electronic warfare, testing of large complex systems like satellites and fighter jets to small complex microchips. I guess you could say I'm quite a data geek. Needless to say, when I assess the bills that come before this body, I look at them through a variety of lenses. One is verifying the constitutionality. One is assessing potential impact on national security. And another, verifying if it is the role of the government in securing and protecting our rights. Regarding Senate Bill 2670, this is a bill that safeguards our essential liberties from encroaching government surveillance. As Ben Franklin so wisely warned, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. This bill deals with precisely that trade-off. And let me be clear, I support our law enforcement. I have family members who are in law enforcement. I know the technology that they use protects citizens, and it can save lives, and it can save the lives of our law enforcement. I greatly appreciate their sacrifice and service. And that being said, I have constituents who are concerned about the proliferation of such technology and the impacts to their privacy. We know that 10 to 15 years ago, there were hardly any license plate readers in our streets. And now there are hundreds, if not thousands, across the state with increasing surveillance platforms on the horizon. And with AI coming on board, there's the unknown and concern about Colorado becoming a surveillance state like China. So where is the appropriate balance between enabling our law enforcement to use these tools while also protecting the citizens' privacy? We've met with various stakeholders, listening to their concerns, trying to troubleshoot possible unintended consequences and striking the right balance. And under the current law, the government can store this data up to 3 years, essentially building a database of people's daily routines, where we go, where we work, worship, shop, or visit loved ones. And the question to ask is, how frequently are our movements being captured? And is it the role of the government to collect potentially sensitive movements of law-abiding citizens? Does this infringe the Fourth Amendment? We know the Supreme Court has been explicitly clear: constant, warrantless surveillance is unconstitutional. In the case of the United States versus Jones, the Supreme Court unanimously held that the government's warrantless attachment of a GPS tracking device on a vehicle is unconstitutional. It involves a physical trespass on private property. Building upon this case is Carpenter versus United States. The court ruled that warrantless access to historic site location information, which tracks a person's movements with their phone, also violates the Fourth Amendment for similar privacy reasons, even without physical trespass. This reinforces the protections against the comprehensive location tracking without judicial oversight. And so now we have this technology that gives real-time tracking through other means such as license plate readers, and it creates a gray area where there's brief pings of information, but prolonged electronic monitoring that reveals detailed patterns of movement, which is akin to GPS and typically triggers a Fourth Amendment protection. Of course, solving crimes is easier with constant surveillance, but it's not a constitutional justification. Requiring a warrant simply restores the balance between law enforcement authority and individual liberty, while preserving those clear exceptions for emergencies and legitimate public safety needs. Understand that this bill is prescriptive, not preventative. It doesn't eliminate these tools. It ensures that they're used in a way that minimizes constitutional concerns. The government can still investigate suspicious activity. That doesn't change. But it can't treat all of us as potentially guilty. Data collection without limits becomes power without limits. If you drove to the Capitol today, someone might already know your route, any stops you made, or even if the passenger was in your car. Imagine that power in the wrong hands, regardless of which party holds the reins. When the government can track your vehicle history back months or years with these databases, any reasonable expectation of privacy is dead. And it's not the role of the government to have God's eye view of its citizens. This isn't a partisan issue. Protecting the Fourth Amendment is a foundational American principle that transcends party lines. Legislators in other states, red and blue alike, are considering similar reforms. Iowa, Kentucky, West Virginia, New York, Washington, and Tennessee are among them. When I taught economics at the Air Force Academy, I told my students that the one, be it a person, business, organization, or even a country, with the most information in a market typically controls it. They gain the most power. The same holds true here. Unfettered access to our movement, data, hands the government unprecedented control over our lives. And to those who say, if you had nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, I would respond, privacy isn't about hiding something bad, it's about protecting something profoundly good, our liberty. And there's another critical concern we can't ignore, data security. These databases hold sensitive location information about law-abiding Americans, where we live, work, and the patterns of our daily routines. Large data systems are prime targets for hackers and foreign adversaries. We've seen it happen in 2014 when China hacked the Office of Personnel Management and compromised the personal information of 21.5 million people, including detailed histories of military personnel and 5.6 million sets of fingerprints, biometrics that can be changed, imposing a permanent risk to our special operation forces and those with security clearances. I was one of those military members that was impacted by that breach. Understand that my district has a high percentage of military members. The movements of military members can be sensitive, and knowing that adversaries like China have proven capable of infiltrating these systems adds another layer of concern. We should not build centralized repositories of our citizens' movements without strong guardrails and security controls. This bill provides those safeguards, ensuring the data is handled with the care it demands and that access requires judicial oversight. It creates guardrails against overreach, empowers law enforcement with constitutional bounds, and shields us from all the dangers of unchecked surveillance. And I understand that this bill is one of a kind, and there are concerns from the opposition. You know that I am open to hearing your concerns and mitigating those issues. Again, the goal is to optimize a balance of equipping our law enforcement with this technology so they can enhance the safety of citizens while also putting guardrails to protect citizens' liberties, privacy, and information. And whether you agree with this bill or not, it is absolutely necessary to have this discussion because with AI coming on board, that brings in a certain element to the equation. The bottom line, we need to secure both our safety and our liberty for generations to come. I look forward to hearing the testimonies and sincerely hope to find an optimal path for the safety of our law enforcement and citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Malek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. It's so great to see you again. I want to thank my co-prime sponsor for being a real champion for this issue. And I will say that we have heard a lot of opposition. We've also heard a lot of support for what we're trying to accomplish today. And I will just reiterate, neither of us is anti-law enforcement, but we are pro-Constitution and we are pro-privacy, and that is how we come together. So from the left and from the right, from Colorado Springs, from Boulder, we're here because we're hearing from our constituents across the ideological spectrum that they don't want mass surveillance. And that feels like where we are headed. People are scared that their private information about where they are going, what they are doing, is going to be shared, and shared to their detriment. In Boulder, people are participating in protests on a regular basis against some of the actions of the federal government. And they don't want the federal government to come in and say, you know what, we're going to take this data that you've been storing for the last 6 months, and we're going to track you at every protest that's happened, and then we're going to come after you for doing that. And, well, to some that might seem hyperbolic, but to the people who are participating in these events, it does not seem that way at all. They are legitimately worried about how this data can be handled and who can see it. And the other thing that we've seen here in Colorado is that the agencies that are contracting for these systems have been, not all, but some of them have been sloppy. And so information has been shared with ICE and with other states, and it is hurting people in Colorado. And you will hear from some people who have been harmed by the imperfect use of this information. So there is no perfection. We're not going to get to perfect. But what we're trying to do is say, here are some reasonable guardrails. So I think the thing that you'll hear often today is about the warrants. Law enforcement does not want to have to get warrants. And so we feel like this is fundamental to what this policy is about. Just like you can't search somebody's cell phone data, you can't go into their home. There are lots of instances when you need a warrant. And what we have made several amendments to the bill to make it easier to get the information you need to get the warrant. So in the introduced version of the bill, we have 24 hours when you can search the database. We also have exigency, so if there's an emergency, you can search the database. If there is a threat of life or property or bodily injury, you can search the database. But if you're doing a longer term investigation, let's say you're investigating a drug ring, and you have some license plates, and you want to search that, and you want to track that person over time, then you gotta get And there was concern about how long we were allowing the data to be stored. In the introduced version, it's 5 days. We heard there were lots of different reasons why 5 days was too short. So we have, in these amendments, extended it to 30 days. And the 24 hours has gone to 72 hours. Those are to make it easier for law enforcement to do their job. And of course, we want law enforcement to be able to do their job, but we don't want data being stored for months on end. We had one stakeholder who said they wanted to be able to hold on to the data in perpetuity. And it's like, well, I don't know where you're going to put all that data. I mean, I don't know how much money you want to spend on storing data in perpetuity, but obviously that isn't the right answer. And maybe 5 days wasn't the right answer either, and so we tried to come to a compromise, and we, after quite a bit of back and forth, landed on 30 days. A warrant, I didn't know this because I'm not in the business of getting warrants, and I heard loud and clear from a lot of the people who you're going to hear from today that I don't know anything about law enforcement. And I have never worked in law enforcement, but I of course have had some people I love get arrested, so I know a little bit about it. But warrants are usually done online. I literally thought that the police officer had to drive down to the courthouse and find a judge and then, get a warrant, and that's not how it works. So they fill out an affidavit, they put that on some online site, and then a judge responds, and usually in just a couple of hours. 99 or 95 to 99% of all the requests are granted. So this, while I understand that it is an extra step, it doesn't feel like it is going to set us back. We heard somebody say, well, this will set law enforcement back 30 years. And again, that feels hyperbolic. We have had this technology for 30 years. We're not taking this technology away. We are just asking, please help the people of Colorado feel like their privacy isn't going to be invaded, because they, for the most part, have done nothing wrong. So we have 10 amendments, which I think most of you have gotten. Well, I think all of you have gotten them. And I will just, I can give you a rundown of these amendments now. If that's what is that what I should do?
Well, I think we've seen, at least I've seen a lot of amendments electronically. I was maybe going to invite you to get the paper copies to Ms. Jensen so we can work on getting them out. And just members will be looking at them before the formal amendment phase. And in the event that any of them are responsive or partially responsive to any testimony that may come up, I think just in the interest of getting to asking questions from the committee and then testimony from the public, well, let's hold off with the deep dive on the amendments for now. If you wanted to make a few summary, brief comments about the package of amendments writ large and sort of what you might be trying to achieve, overall 10 of them, that would be fine.
Yeah, so basically we went from 24 hours to 72 hours. We went from 5 days to 30 days. We made it, a lot of organizations came to us and said, oh, well, my body-worn camera data, I won't be able to keep that. And that we never intended to include body-worn cameras or cameras that are in, like the state of Colorado has fleet vehicles. They were worried that they wouldn't be able to keep cameras in their fleet vehicles. That's not part of the bill. Some of the companies that do tolling were worried that they wouldn't still be able to collect tolls because they use cameras to take a picture of your license plate. That was not our intention. There's an amendment to just ensure that they're not swept up in the bill. It's not about red light cameras or speeding cameras. It's not about a database that has people's information in it that, like for courts and probation, they were concerned that somehow they would have to redo their entire database, and they wanted bill has nothing to do with that. So we've made those things clear. 911 was concerned, so we put in an amendment to make sure that 911 can still operate fully and completely. And then some conforming amendments, and then we narrowed the definition to just license plate reader technology. And we also narrowed the scope of the title so that it's just about license plate reader technology and about, it no longer says it's prohibited, it says that we are regulating it. So that's the wrap up on the amendments.
All right, thank you. And members, Ms. Jensen is collating here with this many amendments. So a little bit on our nonpartisan staff to get them wrapped. So ask for patience on that. We will go to we'll go to questions from members of the committee at this point. We'll come to another phase of the course. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for bringing forward this policy for our consideration. I'd like to just ask, as a threshold matter, what discussions you have had over the course of the stakeholder process from the deployers of this technology.
Yeah, so the tech companies have been involved in the conversations. I will say that they had, I would say that their main concern is that they want the technology to be flexible enough that they don't lose sales because people feel like it's no longer effective. That was sort of a consensus view. But I also believe that and I heard that they understand that cities across the country are going to stop using this technology if their citizens demand that they stop using it. And so they are in agreement that we do need guardrails. And basically everybody told us, yeah, we need guardrails. But then depending on what group the guardrails, nobody actually wants guardrails.
I can only imagine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Romali. I'd like to just put on the record now that Denver has had incredible challenge trying to navigate these policies when Flock has, the corporation Flock has been caught not being completely and directly and fully transparent with the citizens. So I can imagine that they would be responsive to the outcry from the citizenry. Now, I guess, Mr. Chair, I have a question for you. I want to understand whether Motorola, Axon, and Flock will be testifying during today's hearing.
Okay, so members and anyone listening, in recent years we've moved to a sign-up process where nonpartisan staff and committee chairs can see at least who signed up in advance, so we're not rifling through the paper anymore. So in response to Senator Gonzalez's question, that is what I'm looking for. Of course, it's anyone's prerogative to sign up or not. Nobody can be compelled to testify here. I'm not seeing Axon, not seeing Motorola, not seeing Flock. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I would really appreciate, so if anybody is in the audience and listening in, just please let them know that we would welcome the opportunity to seek their input here during the course of this hearing. And so I appreciate very much that they have engaged with the bill sponsors. Please let those leaders and their lobbyists know that we would welcome their presence here at today's hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Members, other preliminary questions of the sponsors before witnesses? Senator Mercer.
Just a question about enforcement. The bill says, the bill description says, an enforcement action is created for the Attorney General to enforce the provisions of the bill. Is that just assume, I didn't actually see the language in there, is that just assumed by that it's put in that the Attorney General is gonna be the one telling the localities whether they're in compliance or not?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Attorney General will be responsive to complaints
Just complaints from who? Citizens?
from citizens, from, I suppose from law enforcement agencies if they felt that their contracts were being violated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Members, other questions? You know, sponsors, I have several brewing, but I think maybe in the interest of getting to the public testimony part, I'll hold them. Okay. As noted, there are a lot of witnesses here. We will do 2 minutes We'll do 2 minutes per witness. At the end of witness testimony, we will do 8 minutes questions per panel. You've indicated some preferred groupings of folks that you know to sign up and support. Likewise, opposition has indicated some preferred groupings will alternate one panel at a time. You, however, may indicate whether you'd like us to start supportive or opposed. Senator Allen.
If we could start with a support panel, and then we would also like to end with a support panel, if that's okay with you. And I think that we have more opposition than support, so they'll have an opportunity to have, yeah.
Okay. We will we'll do our best to honor that. It's going to be a couple of hours more process getting from here to there. But given the sponsor's desire to start with supportive witnesses, we'll call the first panel. We'll request that you give up the table. You're free to sit in front here if you'd like. With that, the first panel of supportive witnesses will be Alistair Whitney, Prasanna Elser, E-L-S-E-R, Stephen Matthews, and Melissa Hidalgo Cuellar. Apologize in advance if I'm not getting this name. All right, thank you all for being with us. I wasn't sure if you could talked amongst yourselves and if there was an order in which you wanted to proceed, otherwise we can just go down the line. Okay, at the beginning, let us know your name, organizational affiliation, if any, and please go ahead.
Thank you.
And a logistic note for everyone, halfway up the black stem of the microphone is a gray button. Use the gray button to activate the mic before you speak. A green light should come on. And on the timer box here, for everyone's information, green means go, yellow means 30 seconds, red means please conclude. It's fine to finish your sentence. When the red light goes, please don't try to finish a paragraph. I'm going to need to enforce it strictly this afternoon. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Weissman and members of the committee. My name is Alistair Whitney, and I'm legislative counsel at the Institute for Justice. IJ is a non-profit public interest law firm that works in both state houses and courthouses around the country to protect folks' constitutional rights, including Fourth Amendment right to be free from warrantless search and seizure. I would like to first start by thanking the sponsors for this bill. This is a really important piece of legislation that addresses a pressing concern. At its core, this bill addresses a simple but urgent problem. Technology has made it extraordinarily easy for the government to reconstruct a person's past movements, often without a warrant, without judicial oversight, and without meaningful limits. Automatic license plate readers, or ALPRs, and similar systems now generate vast databases of historical location information. When aggregated and made searchable, that data reveals far more than a single sighting of a vehicle. It reveals patterns, associations, intimate details of daily life. The Fourth Amendment does not prohibit law enforcement from investigating crime, neither does this bill. It does not prohibit the use of technology, neither does this bill. But it does require process. It requires particularized suspicion, and it requires a neutral judge to stand between the citizen and the state when the government seeks deeply revealing information about that person. In practice, the warrant requirement will make it marginally more difficult for law enforcement to access historical ALPR data, but that slight friction is the point. The Constitution and its protections are not designed for maximum efficiency. Even for the sake of law enforcement, they are designed to protect liberty. Requiring a warrant ensures that surveillance is targeted rather than generalized, and preserves the ability to investigate crimes while preventing dragnet searches of law-abiding people. This is a measured constitutional reform that brings statutory law in line with Fourth Amendment principles in this state, and we respectfully urge your support. Thank you for allowing me to testify today.
All right, thank you. And for each panel, we'll hear from everyone, and we'll go to questions at the end of the entire panel. Please go ahead.
My name is Chrisanna Elser. I work in the financial industry, a sector where integrity is the only currency we have. In my role, an accusation of theft is a professional death sentence. But on September 27th, that identity was nearly dismantled not by a criminal, but by an automatic license plate reader. And an officer retrieved the data as gospel. I was accused of a crime I never committed and forced to prove my innocence. I'm here to testify this technology is being sold as a shield to protect communities, but in practice, it is a digital dragnet that turns our constitutional rights upside down. When Sergeant J.D. Millman of the Columbine Valley Police Department showed up at my door on a Saturday afternoon, I was informed that that department had a strong case against me for stealing a package from somebody's home. Why? Because an ALPR flagged my Forest Green Rivian entering and leaving Beaumont. He told me you can't get a breath of fresh air in or out of town without us knowing. He also told me that he's tracked me over the last month 20 times going in and out of that town. He had a summons already prepared for theft before he even spoke to me. I was faced with the dystopian task of proving my innocence against the inherent evidence from the system. I tried to reach somebody, anyone, from Beaumont or Columbine Valley, who would listen. I started with the Columbine Valley Police Chief for a week and then moved up to town administrators and then finally the mayor of Beaumont. I was ignored for 14 days while I wondered if I still had a job to go back to. But these ladies were too busy to return my calls. The Columbine Valley Police Department was active on a neighborhood app, publicly posting my vehicle and soliciting more evidence from neighbors. They were crowdsourcing a conviction for a crime I clearly didn't commit, while the people in charge of the department refused to grant me 5 minutes of their time and save them a lot of heck. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please go ahead.
Chair Weissman and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Stephen Mathias. I'm here today as a resident of Thornton, representing myself and the hundreds of community members who participated in a local town hall, in person and online, to have a serious conversation about the use of automated license plate reader technology. As an organizer of the event, the attendance and participation I've seen on this issue underscores the urgency not only of this conversation, but of this bill. Our state needs pragmatic, common sense legislation to address this technology, and that's precisely what Senate Bill 70 offers. A single image is just an image, but a series of images becomes a film, and that's what widespread data collection can create. By stitching together points of data over time, it is possible to create a detailed picture of ordinary people living ordinary lives, revealing where we work, where we sleep, where we learn, where we play, where we pray. When that information sits in a searchable database, it changes how safe people are. Survivors weigh whether they can safely leave an abusive home. People going to a therapist, a clinic, or a place of worship wonder who might be watching. People participating in public meetings and discussions ask whether speaking today makes them a target tomorrow. Vulnerable communities become isolated and withdrawn because even leaving home is a risk. This bill doesn't prohibit the use of ALPRs. It sets a clear rule for when and how far back government agencies can look at someone's movements, when preserving rapid access in exigent circumstances because every second counts when lives are at risk. When an agency wants to look further back, the bill draws the right line. Accessing older historical information should require one. That isn't anti-police. It's accountability, security, and safety. It also limits broad retention. Unless there's a reason to keep it, historical information cannot be stored indefinitely. That matters because the more data we store and the more accessible it is, the more attractive and vulnerable it becomes to hackers, foreign governments, and bad actors. This bill protects us by ensuring access is lawful, limited, and accountable. So our data is shared only with the right people for the right reasons, which allows us to feel safe reporting crimes, seeking help, practicing our faith, and participating in public life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Melissa Hidalgo Guerra, and I am the Director of Cobalt Abortion Fund. I'm here to ask for your guest vote on Senate Bill 070. I'm speaking to you today not only as the leader of the largest independent abortion fund in the state, but also as a daughter of a Peruvian immigrant. Fortunately, for my safety, I'm a very white passing Latina. With increased citizen surveillance, increased ICE presence, and increased unjust brutality against Latinas across this country, I fear for my family, who do not have the safety of my white skin. I fear for those who speak Spanish as their primary language, those whose skin is beautifully darkened by our ancestors' kisses, those who love to dance salsa and bachata and cumbia, and those that invite their entire extended family to every birthday, every retirement party, and every Friday night meal. I feel for my family and Latinas every single day. I especially fear for people seeking abortion care who happen to be Latina. Abortion care has been facing increased criminalization throughout this country. Many of our abortion funds clients are forced to travel across state lines to access care in Colorado. Therefore, these populations of Latina abortion seekers are at greater risk of being criminalized the most due to the health care they need, due to the color of their skin, and due to their beautiful accents. Although I feel proud to live in Colorado, where both this state legislature and Colorado voters have affirmed the right to abortion, I have learned that automatic license plate readers pose new risks for abortion seekers and Latinas across this state, our state. Through Colorado Shield Laws Amendment 79, Colorado is committed to protect reproductive autonomy, privacy, and access to care. ALPRs put those rights at risk. ALPRs collect, aggregate, and store location information relating to individuals and vehicles. ALPRs pose an increased vulnerability on a population of abortion seekers that are already one of the most vulnerable populations. Although I oppose APLRs entirely, I do think it's important that we establish clear guidelines and guardrails around this data, requiring a warrant to access the data. I ask for your yes vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we'll go to questions from members of the committee. Senator Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my first question is for Ms. Hauser. Your story made national news. I don't know or remember, I'm sure I never knew all the details of it. But I do remember that you also had like a dashboard camera and you had cell phone camera. Do you have any estimate of how much time and money you spent to prove your innocence?
Well, it was 2 weeks straight, omitted sleep for not possibly having a job to return to, and a little bit of extra money on just trying to think of all the ways we could do it. It was countless hours spent in those conversations and looking things up and trying to contact people. There was even a day where my husband and I took off from work together, went down to the town hall, and were refused to meet with anyone.
I want to say that I'm simultaneously impressed and terrified. I'm grateful that you did that, and I am trying to think in my district, how many people would have the, please don't take this the wrong way, how many people would have the luxury to be able to do that? And the answer is very, very few.
Members, other questions of this panel? Mr. Whitney, I think I'll put this to you. I apologize, I don't know if you're an attorney by background. One of the sponsors noted a number of cases that I think are at least in the ballpark here. I remember Kylo from when I was a younger version of myself. That was an especially interesting case at the U.S. Supreme Court. A challenge here is the concept of what is a reasonable expectation of privacy. Reasonable being in the law contextual, and context has a tendency to shift quickly when technology advances quickly, as I think it's been doing. Looking at the dates on some of these cases, I'm not sure that they come out the same way, years or decades later when technology hadn't advanced. In other words, the Fourth Amendment affords certain protections to people when there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. That of the world as we find it. And yet, what the Fourth Amendment might cognize might be a little bit less than what some people are expecting. So, given the tension in the case law, how does that lead your organization to think about statutory provisions like this one?
Thank you for the question, Chair. The Supreme Court has been quite clear. You have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the whole of your physical movements, which means your public movements. As you probably know, there are two cases that bear significantly on this question and on this debate. It is U.S. v. Jones and U.S. v. Carpenter. In U.S. v. Jones, the unanimous Supreme Court found that placing a tracker device on a person's vehicle, even though they were driving around in public, violated the Fourth Amendment. Similarly, in Carpenter, the issue there was whether or not cell site location information, warrantless access to that information violated the Fourth Amendment. In both, it was clear that the court, as you noted, and maybe is a few years behind catching up to the recent advancements in technology, but I think both decisions were clear in the sense that they incorporate the Fourth Amendment's protections when there are these new forms of technology that show where you've been going, what you've been doing, and how you've been living your life. I will say that, for example, with the cell site location information technology, that shows an approximate location. Sometimes it's quite inaccurate, up to 500 feet. That was, especially at the time that the case was decided. Here we are talking about specific location information showing exactly where you've been and what you've been doing at various points and places all over the state and all over the country. So I hope that answers your question, but I think the reason why this legislation is necessary is because courts are behind, frankly, and this the Constitution is a floor, as you know. This body is free to raise that floor and provide greater protections to its citizens, as other states have.
Thank you. I think one follow-up in terms of what's the unit of analysis for thinking about the Fourth Amendment. I was actually just reading a federal court opinion last night that went into this different subject. The Fourth Amendment begins the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. We think commonly and rightly of the home as being the place where the Fourth Amendment protection is most strong. There's the example of the car even moving in a public place. A flock camera is not in your home, it's in a public intersection, but I think the gravamen is that the Fourth Amendment isn't really about places, right? It's not really about the house, it's not really about the office, it's not really about the child care center or even the public square. It is about people and security and search and seizures and what constitutes that. As we get ready for a long afternoon of testimony here, would you say that's a fair way to think about the Fourth Amendment?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. It absolutely is. And I would just add that, while the focus of the Fourth Amendment is on individuals and preventing warrantless searches and seizures of individuals, right? And obviously it describes the types of property that are intimately connected to individuals. I will note that male care cameras in this state and other states are pointed outside people's driveways, outside churches, maybe even gun ranges, other places like public parks where people might go and exercise their constitutional rights. So that's one of the main reasons why my law firm, the Institute for Justice, is very concerned about the proliferation of this technology without any constitutional guardrails, in large part, in most places.